I'm Kat.
I'm Rachel.
We are the Pandemonium.
Oh, good morning.
Good mornings.
I was editing this morning.
Should have forgot to put my phone on silent.
Not like last time. Jesus Christ. That one video I was editing and I was like, Jesus Christ, what was I? Oh, I was watching Snapchats from Sydney. That's right. That's a good cup. You're so cute. I like your hair in braids. Little, huh?
I forgot I was muted. I said I don't do it very often.
I mean, I can't do it as often as I used to because I used to do canuches where they were on top of my head, you know?
Your hair was a lot longer then too, so I mean.
Well, it was down to my butt. I mean, let me just move this because I
And
can't.
now it's not.
Now it's not. My hair is. Well, if I take it down out of this, it comes down to here, but record it. So we had quite an eventful day yesterday, which I had posted on my personal Facebook. I'm thinking about posting on the podcast Facebook page. We have T-Mobile. We're very, very happy with our mobile plan with T-Mobile, but they've been installing fiber. Fine. Okay. However, we're happy with their internet because they come out and they moved all of our stuff for us. We have a hub in the backyard and, excuse me, readjusting the tatas. When you're pregnant, that's not one of the things that they tell you that needs to be done every 5 to 10 minutes. And he kept coming to the house. I said, listen, I can't make these decisions without my husband. I'm going to have to let you know. Do you have a car or anything? He goes, no, but we'll be back later this week. I said, fine, come by Saturday around this time. He shows up at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. It is a Saturday. I am heavy pregnant. Anyways, I happen to be awake and Josh is already in the other room working on the nursery, readjusting the furniture, which you saw. I'll take pictures and I'll put them up because I'm really happy with the nursery. And I was just like, my husband and I are not going to change. We already discussed it. Our balance sheet is good. So we do not want to switch because it would increase our phone bill by almost $100. Granted, we wouldn't have to pay, I think it was $89 for Spectrum anymore, but he's like, well, you could get it for $70. And I was like, no, because that doesn't include installation or anything. Oh no, we'll do it for free. I know you won't. So he came back again yesterday. Mind you, he came after I'm in the middle of making dinner. Rachel knows that is the one time a day you do not call me, is in between 3 and 5 p.m. I am cooking. You do not call me during that time, unless you're my mother, in which case she gets passed, or my father because he's adorable. But I open the door to the spice cabinet. Ours is wired. One of the spices flew out and fell on the floor, shattering. I was wearing socks. Luckily, I wasn't in my bare feet. So what I did is I just hopped a couple of spaces over and then went and got my chanclitas, put those on. For all those who don't know, chanclitas are house shoes. Chanclas, the little flippers. So I put on my chanclitas. I swept everything best I could because I couldn't bend over all the way. And I had to do weird squatting motions to get the stupid dustpan to work because I'm very pregnant, guys. Okay? This isn't just fact. It's baby. So then, all of a sudden, I hear and I was like, just a minute, I'll be right there. And I said it loud enough where you can barely hear it on the camera. And then he rings the doorbell not once, but twice in a row. And I said just a forking minute. I opened the door and his first response is, "Don't kill me." And I slammed the door and locked it. And I was like, not today. I don't have the spoons or the patience. So Tamara, I love Tam. She just commented on that video I posted. At that point, I'd call the cops for harassment. Pest control guys that walk around didn't see the sign on a neighbor's door, rang the doorbell once. They reported it to the cops. While we were talking to him, 2 police cars rolled up to explain to him what no solicitation meant. Said if we couldn't respect the signs, that they would have to go a step further, and that was the one door ringing. More than that is total harassment, and they can be arrested. So if he comes by again, I'm going to call the cops and be like, listen, I have a no solicitation sign on my door. And I also put on there that they owe me $15 a minute. So he owes me $150 for 10 minutes. And he still hasn't paid. So that was my day yesterday. However, I do have to say the pork loin from Walmart Neighborhood Market, chef's kiss.
Oh, good. I'm so glad it was delicious. And I'm so glad you had such a horrible time. And I'm being very polite.
Hold on. You said you're glad I had a horrible time?
I said, I'm sad you had a horrible time. But I'm glad that the food was delicious.
We made mashed potatoes to go with it. So it was quite delicious. But that being said, this is our last episode for the month of March. And I've already warned Rachel. She's going to hate me.
It's okay. You're going to hate me for the next episode. So. Fair's fair.
Well, technically not the next episode because we're recording this out of order. So I'm going to hate you for the next episode that we record, but it's going to be the previous episode for our listeners.
Is it? Are you sure? I mean, you're going to hate my next episode anyway, so I mean, fair's fair.
So it's because this one is for 3/27. And then the one that you're doing comes out on the 20th, which is Leonardo Ciancialupi.
The soap lady. Got it.
The soap lady. The soap lady. But, you know, we didn't really like it last year when somebody was just like, I don't know who you're talking about. You don't listen. If you're not listening to us all that often, you don't need to know. So today, we're going to call the person that we're discussing over a name that is not their name. So we're going back to old habits, people, per Rachel's request, because we need a little levity in today's life.
And also this person is super evil, so.
I did give her a hint, so.
This is a Pandemonium Witches podcast. Trigger warning. The following episode contains graphic violence and gruesome depictions. Listener discretion is advised.
Are you ready for the TLDR? And then we'll go into everything else.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, because we got to start somewhere.
So get your hydration station set up, guys. We already have ours. My little hocus pocus. I've already taken my meds. I know Rachel's taken hers. Today's topic is, I chose a monster for the last episode of the month because Rachel decided to go straight into our episodes with a monster. So I'm going to go in with her least favorite, cornflake unaliver. This has been talked about a lot, covered on hundreds of thousands of podcasts and YouTubes, such as Our Queen, Bailey Syrian, Last Podcast on the Left, Killer Minds, Morbid, Interview with Evil, True Crime Garage, The First Degree, Sinisterhood, and the Serial Killer Podcast, along with many more. So, today's TLDR, his motives or modus operandi typically consisted of convincing his target that he was, quote, in need of assistance, or duping them to believe he was an authority figure. This is why people in self-defense classes, at least the ones that I took, said that if an elderly or a man is asking for your help, go get another man and be like, he needs your help.
And if you can't find another man, find somebody else to be there to at least be a witness.
Then this monster would lure his victims to his vehicle, at which point he would bludgeon them unconscious, restrain them with handcuffs before driving them to a remote location to be essayed and unalived. Today, we're talking about Theodore Robert Bundy, aka Tedward Sprinkletits. So for the rest of today's episode, his name will be known as Sprinkletits. If you have a problem with that, scroll forward because I give 0 forks.
Or if you just have an issue with this topic for this particular Rice Krispies person, just skip the episode in general. So,
Cornflake unaliver.
Rice Krispies because he made them snap, crackle, and pop.
This is not BTK.
Same thing applies, though.
I love you, but you are so wrong.
We already know that I'm not mentally well. I mean, come on.
So, I don't want to call him by his actual name for the whole episode. So if you're okay with me calling him Sprinkled or Sparkle Tits, are you okay with that today?
Fine. I think it's hilarious.
I just went through the whole document and changed his name to Sparkle Tits. So,
I love that.
thank you. Control F. So, Sparkle Tits McGee was born on November 24th, 1946. I accidentally hit the mic. So, that makes Sparkle Tits a Sagittarius. I don't have my book. My book is all the way over there. It means that they are adventurous, optimistic, honest, and freedom-loving, and a fire-ruled sign. They also are extremely honest, but pathological liars as well. So that tracks with a couple of people that I know that are born in November, at least at the tail end of November, beginning December. He was unalived January 24th, 1989. Good for him. Good for him. He was American cornflake unaliver who kidnapped, raped, and murdered dozens of young women and girls between 74 and 78, known as the Summer of Sam. I'll cut that part out. So, good old Sparkle Tits McGee was born Theodore Robert Colwell to mother Eleanor Louise Colwell at Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. Have you been to Vermont?
Does driving through it count?
Technically, yes.
Then yes. Only because I was going to Maine.
I drove through it when I was moving. So, quite beautiful. Seasons change. So, his bio dad's identity has never been confirmed, and his original birth certificate apparently assigned paternity to a salesman and a U.S. Air Force veteran named Lloyd Marshall, although a copy of it listed his father as unknown. Louise claims she met a war veteran named Jack Worthington. He apparently abandoned her soon after she had become pregnant, and census records reveal that several men by the name of John Worthington or Jack Worthington and Lloyd Marshall lived near Louise when Sparkle Tits was conceived. Some family members expressed suspicions that he was sired by Louise's own father, Samuel Cowell. And I'm not talking about the famous guy that's on America's Got Talent. Not the same dude. So I wrote these notes last year. Suspicions are correct. Family tree is a wreath. Okay, cool. Alabama banjo sounds. Ding, 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 ding. So in the 2020 documentary film Crazy Not Insane, we'll talk about more about TV shows and films that he was in. Psychiatrist Dorothy Otno Lewis claims she received a sample of Bundy's blood and that the DNA test had confirmed that he was not the product of incest. And I went, well, shit. You have thought.
They can tell that through blood tests. I thought it was through like a skin scraping DNA testing.
They can do that before in the 90s and in the 80s, they could do it with skin scraping. Now, as early as the 20s, early 2000s, they can do it through blood.
Yay, modern technology.
DNA analysis. So, until 1949, when Sparkle Tits McGee was 3 years old, he lived in Roxborough Block of Philadelphia with his maternal grandparents, Samuel Nett Cowell and Eleanor Miriam Longstreet. He showed signs of deep, disturbing behavior at a very early age, in some interviews starting as young as 3, which was 1949. So the couple raised him as their son to avoid the social stigma that accompanied childbirth outside wedlock at that time, because it was the early 50s. So families and friends and even young Tits was told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his older sister. Good old Sparkle finally discovered the truth, although his recollections of the circumstances varied. He told a girlfriend that a cousin showed him a copy of his birth certificate after calling him, quote, a bastard, and told biographers Stephen Machad and Hugh Ainsworth that he had found the certificate himself. So he has a couple of different, not really corroborating stories. Anne Rule, who is a biographer and a true crime writer, knew Sparkle Tits personally. She wrote that he did not find out about his true parentage until 1969, when he located the original birth record in Vermont himself. Bombastic side-eye. And so he expressed a lifelong resentment towards his mother for never telling him about any of this or his real father. He also blamed her for leaving him to discover the truth about his dad for himself. In later interviews after his arrest, Sparkle Tits spoke warmly of his grandparents, telling his friend Anne that he identified with and respected and clung to his grandfather Samuel. Sparkle described his grandmother as timid, obedient woman who underwent electroconvulsive therapy for depression and later in life was too afraid to leave the house and became agoraphobic.
Poor woman.
Billy B's here.
No, I mean, just because she's depressed, she received electroshock therapy. That does not fix depression. Instead, it kills your brain.
But this was the 50s before antidepressants.
Still doesn't make it any better. Also, still kills the brain cells. Doesn't matter what when it happened.
Well, there's more. These accounts of Sparkle's grandparents have been challenged in more recent investigations. Some longtime residents of the neighborhoods remember Sam as a fine man and expressed confusion over claims that he had, quote, violent behavior. Quote, the characterization that Sam was a raging alcoholic and an animal abuser was a convenient narrative used to justify why Sparkle Tits McGee turned out the way that he did, said one of Sparkle's cousins. From my limited exposure to him, nothing could be farther from the truth. His daughters adored him and spoke of nothing but fondness. Note, Louise's younger sister, Audrey, clarified that their mother was not mentally ill, but rather housebound after suffering a stroke related to obesity. What people don't know is there's still a stigma with DV. So even in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't talked about, it wasn't acknowledged. Now people are starting to talk about it a little bit more openly and being a little bit more candid about the conversations that they're having. I mean, it took a long time for my husband to admit that he was in a emotionally and mentally abusive relationship with his ex. I know she watches this show, and I don't care because a hater is still a follower, in my opinion. Anyways, back on track. I'm leaving that in. I don't care. I'm not going to cut it out. So still in 1949, she hates me, and I know she does. It's okay. Kisses. So Julia Cowell, Louise's youngest sister, recalled waking from a nap at Sparkle Tit's house to find herself surrounded with knives from the kitchen, with 3-year-old Sparkle standing silently beside the bed, smiling. So in 1950, Sparkle's mom, Louise, changed her last name from Cowell to Nelson, and, encouraged by several family members, left Philadelphia with Sparkle Tits to start fresh in Tacoma, Washington. She moved in with her cousins Alan and Jane Scott. In 1951, Louise met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a hospital cook. They met during a singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church. They married later that year, and Johnny formally adopted Sparkle. Louise and Johnny went on to have 4 more children together. Although he made efforts to include Sparkle in family outings like camping trips, Sparkle remained emotionally distant.
I mean, considering that they went on to go have other kids, I'm sure they did go on dates.
I would assume so. I would definitely assume so. I did turn my camera a little bit. Because we're not matching up height-wise on the... Well, then again, you're a foot taller than me, so I mean...
And I'm sitting on 2 pillows on my chair. So,
so in later years, he reported complaining to a girlfriend that Johnny was not his real father, wasn't very bright, and didn't make much money. It was the 50s. Nobody made any money. In Tacoma, his childhood neighbor, Sandy Holt, described him as a mean-spirited kid who seemed to enjoy causing fear, pain, and panic, which is actually names of people on Nightmare Before Christmas. And Hercules, Panic and Pain. According to her, Sparkle Tits once hung a stray cat from a backyard clothesline and then set it on fire using lighter fluid.
that poor thing.
I pray it was dead. However, I was not able to confirm.
It most likely wasn't because his track record.
True. So she also claimed that he would lure younger neighborhood children into the woods and force them to undress and terrorize them. You would hear screaming for blocks, she said. No matter where we were, we could hear the screaming. He said that he had built makeshift booby traps and pits lined up with sharpened sticks, hidden under leaves and dirt, aka punji traps, super racist, so we're just going to say booby traps, around the neighborhood, which one reportedly injured a girl. So Sparkle buried his recollections in Tacoma years later, never keeping with the same story. To Michaud and Ainsworth, a reporter and investigator team who interviewed Sparkle while he was on death row in Florida, he described picking through trash barrels in search of pictures of unclothed women. He once told Michaud that he would consume large quantities of alcohol and canvass the community late at night in search of undraped windows where he could observe women undressing and whatever else could be seen. To attorney and author Polly Nelson, who, if you haven't read her books, oh my God, she's done so many good things. Like uncovering a lot of really gruesome and horrific things. I have 3 of her books on my Kindle, and I just tore through them in a day, and he came home and surprised me, and I nearly decked him. So, just telling you how good her books are. So, he said he perused detective magazines and crime novels for stories that involved schmexual violence, particularly when the stories were illustrated with pictures of unalived or injured women. In a letter to Rule, however, he asserted that he never, ever, ever read fact detective magazines, and he shuddered at the thought that anyone would read that trash. Accounts of his social life painted a mixed picture, though. He told journalists Michaud and Ainsworth that he chose to be alone during adolescence, claiming that he didn't understand how interpersonal relations worked. Quote, I didn't know what made people want to be friends. I don't know what underlay social interactions. Other people just viewed him as shy and introverted. Sparkle insisted he wasn't a social outcast, just someone who didn't participate in typical teen activities like dances or drinking parties.
The call is coming from inside the house.
I'm just saying. So from 58 to 61, Sparkle attended Hunt Junior High. He was reportedly the target of relentless bullying. Classmates poured cold water on him while he showered alone in a private stall, avoiding open showers used by other students. By the time he reached Woodrow Wilson High School, I'm not even going to read that. I'm just going to skip to the next one. So from 61 to 65, he attended Woodrow Wilson High School. Peers described him to Anne Rule as well-known and well-liked, calling him a medium-sized fish in a large pond, that he was very cute and attractive-looking. Sparkle's main athletic interest was downhill skiing, a hobby he pursued obsessively. He often used stolen equipment and forged lift tickets to go skiing. Despite his straight-laced appearance, he was arrested at least twice in high school for burglary and car theft. These charges were later expunged from his record when he turned 18, which is allowed under Washington state law. This is going to take some time, guys. We got quite a lot of pages. 1965, after graduating from high school, Sparkle Tits enrolled in the University of Puget Sound, aka UPS, attending for 1 year after transferring to the University of Washington, or UW, to study Chinese. In 67, this is where I lost my marbles. He began a romantic relationship with UW classmate Diane Edwards. identified under several pseudonyms in several biographies about Sparkle, most commonly known as Stephanie Brooks. He would later refer to her as the only woman I have ever loved. Creepy. 68. Sparkle had dropped out of college and was working a series of low-paying jobs. He also became politically active, volunteering at the Seattle office for Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign, serving as a driver and bodyguard for Arthur Fletcher during his bid for lieutenant governor of Washington. Have you noticed? Like, a lot of the cornflake unalivers were very politically motivated?
Unfortunately.
Makes me sick. Makes me sick. This baby makes it hard for me to breathe sometimes. Okay. That spring, his girlfriend, Diane, graduated and moved to San Francisco. So Sparkle reconnected with her later that year after earning a scholarship to attend a summer program in Chinese at Stanford University. It is hard to get into Stanford. Really, really hard. In August of 68, Sparkle traveled from Miami to attend the Republican National Convention. Shortly after, Diane ended their relationship for good, citing Sparkle's, quote, immaturity and lack of direction. Dorothy Lewis would later identify this breakup as the pivotal time in his cornflake unaliver and development. Brokenhearted and lonely, he drifted around, never settling in one place for too long. He traveled to Colorado, then Far East, visiting relatives in Arkansas and Philadelphia. He briefly enrolled in Temple University for one semester and made frequent trips to NYC, where he reportedly became consumed by violent snuff literature. Can't say that word. Snuff. According to Anne Rule, it was during this period that Sparkle also uncovered the truth about his parentage while visiting Vermont, because that's one of the places he stopped. Sparkle returned to Washington the fall of 1969, where he met Elizabeth Cloper, who was a single mother from Ogden, Utah, and worked as a secretary at the University of Washington School of Medicine. In bios about Sparkle, she was referred under various pseudonyms, including Meg Anders, Beth Archer, and Liz Kendall. Of course, they had a very rocky relationship, and it would continue well past Sparkle's initial arrest in Utah, which was later in 1976. So, still in 69, Sparkle became the father figure to Liz's daughter, Molly, who was 3 years old when he entered their lives. He remained a presence in Molly's life until she was 10 after his first initial arrest. As an adult, Molly later described a disturbing pattern of abuse and sexually inappropriate behavior that began when she was about 7. Her accounts include incidents of Sparkle hitting her, knocking her down, endangering her near water, exposing himself, and disguising schmexual content as accidents and or gangs.
He's dead, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Because otherwise, I was going to say, I'll grab the pitchfork. You grab the flames. Let's roll.
He didn't gone. He didn't gone. So by mid-1970s, Sparkle had re-enrolled in the University of Washington, this time majoring in psychology. He became a dedicated student and was well regarded by professors. In 1971, he took a position at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center, where he worked alongside his new friend and later true crime writer, Anne Rule. At this time, she saw nothing alarming in Sparkle's behavior, describing him as kind, solicitous, and even empathetic. In 1972, after graduating from UW, Sparkle joined Governor Daniel J. Evans' re-election campaign. Disguised as a college student, he shadowed Evans' opponent, former Governor Albert Rossellini, recording speeches for strategic analysis. Impressed by his work, Governor Evans appointed Sparkle to the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. After the election, Sparkle was hired as the assistant to Ross Davis, chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. Ross described him as smart, aggressive, and a believer in the political system. Now you can see why I was getting worked up doing this and why I did it last year.
Yes, I can definitely understand.
So, in early 1973, despite lackluster LSAT scores, Sparkle was accepted into law schools at the University of Puget Sound, UPS, and the University of Utah, U of U. Thanks to glowing recommendation from Governor Evans, Ross Davis, and several UW psychology professors, who gave him glowing letters of review. That summer, he went on a political trip to California. This is where he rekindled his relationship with Diane Edwards. She was struck by his new, apparent, and drastically different transformation. He seemed focused and successful and professional and the verge of a promising career. The entire time he was still dating Liz.
Yes, a promising career as a cornflake person.
Cornflake unaliver. He's still dating Liz. None of them know about each other. By the way, this was before the internet, because we were alive when Google was born, just to let you guys know. So in the fall of 1973, Ted enrolled at the UPS Law School and continued courting Diane, who visited them several times in Seattle. They spoke of marriage, and Sparkle even introduced her to Ross Davis as his fiance. 1974 is where it took a turn. We're going to take a minute, because this is where it gets bad. It's already bad. This is where it gets worse. By 1974, young women began disappearing across the Pacific Northwest. There was no clear consensus on when or where Sparkle Tits McGee began his unalive rampage. He gave conflicting accounts to different people, including his good buddy Anne, and deliberately withheld details about his earliest or beginning crimes, even while describing later murders in graphic detail during the days leading up to his execution. So we talked about these two earlier, Mashad and Crud. I already forgot his name. Mashad and Ainsworth. Okay. So psychologist James Nelson gave Sparkle Tits McGee several interviews. So Mashad, Ainsworth, right? Ainsworth? Whatever. The journalists, okay? The two journalists and the psychologist. They gave him several interviews. In those interviews, he claimed that he first attempted an abduction, which took place in Ocean City, New Jersey in 1969, but insisted he did not commit his first unaliving until 1971 in Seattle. So what was he doing in 1971 in Seattle? Do you remember?
A lot of stuff he wasn't supposed to be doing.
So he was working at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center.
Again, a lot of things that he wasn't supposed to be doing or should have been doing.
Okay, so he was doing that, right? Okay. In contrast, he told another psychologist, Art Norman, that he unalived two women in Atlantic City during a 1969 visit to family in Philadelphia. To homicide detective Robert Keppel, Sparkle hinted at a murder in Seattle in 1972 with another in 73 involving a hitchhiker near Tumwater, but he refused to give them any other specifics. Both Detective Keppel and Ted's friend Anne believed it was possible that Sparkle began killing as early as being a teenager, not including the cat incident. His earliest confirmed unalivings was when he was 27, and by his own admission, he had, by that time, refined his methods and learned how to avoid leaving incriminating forensic evidence, skills that proved highly effective pre-DNA. January of 74, he cut off all contact with Diane. She wrote him countless letters and called him a lot, which went unanswered. When she finally reached him by phone weeks later and she demanded an explanation, he replied coldly, "Diane, I have no idea what you mean," and hung up on her. She never spoke to him again. Note: Sparkle Tits McGee later admitted, "I just wanted to prove to myself that I could have married her."
Well, she dodged a rock.
So just like I did with the previous episodes, I'm going to be doing yearbook photos to honor these women. Okay? Hold on to that photo. Diane came to believe that the entire courtship had been a calculated act of revenge, and that Sparkle Tits had waited years to win her back just so he could reject her as she rejected him previously. Around the same time as this whole thing with Diane thing happened, Sparkle started skipping his law school classes, which he had perfect attendance. Shortly after midnight, around the time that Sparkle ended his relationship with Diane, he broke into the basement of 18-year-old Karen Sparks. So that's Karen. Very beautiful. Very kind. She was a dancer and University of Washington student living in Seattle's University District. Sparkle hit her with a metal rod taken from her bed frame and then SA'd her with the same weapon, causing severe internal injuries and rupturing her bladder. She remained unconscious in the hospital for 10 days, and though she survived, she was left with permanent brain damage and significant loss of vision and hearing. I am sorry, but I told you, this is where it gets worse.
I know. Doesn't mean I gotta like it or enjoy it. It's a lot of sighing on my end. Just roll with it.
I have to move all the camera stuff around so that way I can see the Facebook Messenger on the bottom so I can send you all the pictures. February 1st of 74. Sorry. My hips hurt. Yay, pregnancy. So early in the morning hours of February 1st, 1974, Sparkle broke into the basement of his next victim, Lydia Ann Healy. She was born on July 3rd, 1952 in Seattle, Washington, or Oregon. There are a few conflicting documents. Details surrounding her life are completely unavailable. She was a student at the U of W, and at the time of her unaliving, she was an undergraduate known for broadcasting morning weather reports for skiers. He beat her unconscious, dressed her in jeans and a white blouse and boots, and then carried her away. She was abducted from her basement in Seattle, and she was the first of many young women to go missing in the area. All of the cases were believed to be connected and believed to be committed by the man in a sling who went by the name, quote unquote, Ted. Sparkle confessed to breaking into Linda's room, beating her and dressing her in blue jeans, white blouse and boots before abducting her, and then confessed to essaying her and unaliving her. He then admitted driving her to a remote location where he essayed her again, unalived her before dumping her body. During the first half of 74, female college students vanished at a rate about 1 per month. Are you sure you're okay?
I mean, no, but we got to get through this.
I am sorry.
It's okay.
How do you think I felt researching this? Like, these are places that I went. I didn't go to U of W, but I mean, like, I have family and friends that go there or went there, and I went to go visit. Like, I've gone on these highways, and I was just reading these, and I couldn't sit down for a couple of days after researching. I had to take like months, if not weeks off. March 12th, Donna Gail Manson was born in Olympia, Washington on June 9th of 54. She was a student at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. She was reportedly depressed, possibly suicidal, at the time of her disappearance. Donna was last seen the night of March 12th at her college. She told a roommate she was planning to attend a jazz concert that was being held on campus. She was last seen between the dorms and the library, walking in the direction of the concert. There's a blind spot there. Donna was the second of many young women to go missing in that area around that time frame, and all the cases were believed to be linked to Sparkle. August 29th of 78, 2 fishermen walking Highway 7 east of Eatonville, Washington. I told you I drove on these highways. Discovered a human skull on the foothills of Mount Rainier. One of the items found was a multicolored colored shirt, one similar to what Donna was last seen wearing. The remains were not believed to be Donna's, as they believed they were dumped there after 74. In 1996, the investigation to the remains were revived due to a 1996 article in the News Tribune about 3 sets of remains, including the ones found in 78, 2 skeletons that were dumped in the Tacoma landfill in late 70s, early 80s, but it's unknown of what became to the Eatonville remains. After examining the dental records associated with the remains, 8 possible matches, including Donna, were brought to police attention. A forensic dentist was able to rule out all of the matches apart from Donna. This was not enough to identify her, so she remained a missing person, despite her case being revived for such a short time. He confessed to Donna's abduction, presumed rape, and murder, although he gave differing accounts, saying, I dumped her body in numerous places. First, he claimed in the mountains. Then he claimed Cascades. And finally, he said her remains were discovered March of 75 on Taylor Mountain, like most of the other Washington and Oregon victims. He also claimed to have burned Donna's skull in his girlfriend's fireplace, quote, down to the last ash in a fit of paranoia and cleanliness. That does not happen in fireplaces.
I was about to say, you have to get bone to disintegrate like that. You have to get it extremely hot, like almost like 4-digit hot. Like no, or 4 figures hot. Like no way he could have gotten that done in a fireplace.
Not at all. I did call a friend of mine who is a mortician, and she even confirmed. She's like, there's no way that can be done. I was like, I thought so. I thought he was full of it. So in April, okay, This is April of 74, so we're going back. Sparkle stopped going to classes altogether. April 17th, Susan Elaine Rancourt was born October 12th, 1955, in La Conner, Washington. At an unknown date, she began attending Central Washington State University. And April 17th, she attended an evening advisors meeting at her university. After it ended, she began walking back to her dorm, and she was never seen from again in one of those blind spots. Sparkle attacked her, and she was just 18 at the time. She disappeared while walking to her dorm. And her skull was found on March 3rd, 1975, in Issaquah, Washington, which is a wooded area near Taylor Mountain. A lot of his dump sites were roughly around the Taylor Mountain area. She was identified the same month that her body was found. Her cause of death couldn't be determined, but the case was deemed a homicide. Sparkle Tits confessed to Susan's abduction, presumed rape, and unaliving when he was interviewed before his death in 1989. Following her disappearance, 2 female students from Central Washington reported encounters with a man wearing a sling who asked for help carrying books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle one night before Susan vanished, and another night 3 nights earlier. These women declined to help. May 6th, Roberta Kathleen Kathy Parks. She was born on February 27th, 1954 in Lakewood, Ohio. On an unknown date, she began attending Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. She was 22 years old when she disappeared. On May 6, 1974, she left her dormitory at Oregon State University. She was supposed to meet her friends at the Memorial Union, but never arrived. Her remains were found March 3rd, 1975. They're all found in the same day, these remains. They found one and then subsequently started finding more and more and more and more. She was identified 4 days later, same burial ground, Issaquah. Her cause of death could not be determined, but her case was deemed a schmomicide. Sparkle Tits later claimed he spotted Parks in the cafeteria and persuaded her to go with him to a bar and then tied and gagged her when she got in his car. He said he drove her back to Washington, essayed her twice along the way, and ultimately unalived her. When Kathy disappeared, police began to get worried because she was the 4th college-age woman to disappear in the Pacific Northwest in 4 months. They did not have any concrete evidence at this time, but all the cases were believed to be connected and believed to be committed by the man in the sling. Next, we have Brenda. Brenda was born on November 8th, 1951 in Washington. No city known. She was described as having a fun and free-loving spirit. She was unemployed at the time of her disappearance, which was on May 31st, 74. She was 22 at the time, and she decided to go to the Flame Tavern in Buren, Washington. She was last seen leaving the club and seen in the parking lot talking to a brown-haired man with his arm in a sling. She disappeared after leaving the tavern in Buren, but was located near Seattle Tacoma International Airport. When it was discovered that Brenda was last seen talking to a man in his arm in a sling, police immediately raised the flag. A man fitting his description was also seen on the same campus as Susan Rancourt, another missing woman. Her skull, too, was found on March 3rd. She was identified 2 days later. Her skull was damaged, suggesting that she was hit to unalived. Sparkle later admitted to bringing Brenda back to his house, where they engaged in consensual schmex before he throat-hugged her in her sleep, though his explanation did not account for the severe damage to her cranium.
Also, I don't think he understood the actual word consent, because consent does not lead to any of this at all.
The disappearances continued throughout Oregon and Washington. It wasn't just Seattle. It was the whole state of Oregon and the whole state of Washington. So investigators in Seattle and King County grew very alarmed. Despite a pattern, there was little evidence to actually work with. The missing women shared a few connections beyond similar appearance, which were young, attractive, white college students with long hair parted in the middle. June 11th, as it had only been 10 days since the last abduction, and since he had last unalived someone, George Ann Hawkins disappeared. She was 18 years old and a U of W student who disappeared while walking down a well-lit alley between her boyfriend's dorm and her sorority. She was last seen leaving her boyfriend's residence hall following a conversation from his window. It was quickly ruled out that she had not voluntarily left campus, as she was a good academic student with good standing and was on good terms with her friends and not depressed or suicidal. The following morning, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a criminalist meticulously searched the alley on their hands and knees, but found no trace of her left. Sparkle later told Detective Keppel that he had lured George Ann to his car, knocked her unconscious with a crowbar, and then handcuffed her. He then drove her to Issaquah, which was about 20 miles east from where they were, throat hugged her, and spent the entire night with her body in the car. The next afternoon, he returned to the U of W alley right in the middle of a major crime scene investigation and audaciously took her earrings from underneath detectives' noses and one of her shoes from the nearby parking lot before leaving completely unnoticed.
Oh, now he's cocky. Okay.
He was already cocky, but now it's getting worse. He's taunting. I explained this to Josh yesterday because we're watching Prodigal Son, and I was like, it's different. It's not teasing. Or it's not taunting, it's teasing. This is him teasing or mocking the police. Detective Keppel described the act as so brazen it astonishes the police even to this day. Sparkle also admitted to revisiting her body on 3 separate occasions. I will leave the rest up to your imagination on what happened because you and I both know what happened. I'm not going to say it out loud because it makes me sick, but I'm trying to keep my food in my system. Moving on. The link to similar disappearances in the area was not initially noticed by investigators who kept most details about George Ann's case very confidential. This led her parents to contact other agencies in the area, including agencies up north and agencies south, to learn of 5 subsequent previous abductions of brown-haired young women at this point in 74. In 89, before his death, Sparkle claimed to have abducted George Ann in the alleyway leading to her sorority's house after he convinced her to help him because his arm was broken and he needed assistance to get to his car. So, I said that he had laid with her body, right? He later changed his story, stating that not only was she throat hugged, but he Anne Boleyn'd her and buried the separate parts 25 to 50 yards from each other and 10 yards from the roadside on a rocky hillside. He said that the leg bone and vertebrae found with 2 other victims belonged to Georgianne. However, this was never confirmed, and her case is still open today. I got a message, but
Okay, I was like, what are we looking at? Like, I can totally see your screen.
so on June 14th, we have Denise. She was born on October 10th of 1955 in Washington. She was studying to be a computer programmer, and she disappeared from Lake Sammamish State Park. She was spending the day there with her boyfriend and another couple, but vanished after going to the bathroom. There isn't a lot of information about Denise that I could find, but what I could find was that her remains were not found until 3 months after her unaliving and disappearance, which was September of 74, 2 miles away from where she disappeared. Sparkle later confessed to her murder and her disappearance right before his execution. Picture I just sent you is for Janice Ann Blackburn Ott. She was born on February 14th, 1951 in McMinnville, Oregon. She was married December 28th of 71 to Jim Ott, who lived in Issaquah, Washington. She worked as a caseworker at King County Juvenile Court and Youth Services Center. So she was a big public servant. Janice was last seen at the beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in Issaquah, talking to a young man wearing a white tennis outfit with his arm in a sling on June 14th. She went with him and was last seen leaving the beach. This man had been seen earlier that day. He asked 4 women to help him unload his sailboat from his tan or bronze-colored Volkswagen Beetle. He had spoken with a light, possibly Canadian or British accent, and said his name was Ted. Out of the 4 asked, only 1 woman went with him, but ran away when she saw that there was no sailboat in his car.
Good for her.
I'm getting parched over here. The man was seen asking the same question to Janice. She died the same day. She was only 23 years old, and she was known as Sparkle's 7th murder victim. So, of course, after Georgianne's disappearance spread, several witnesses came forward with sightings of a man on crutches, wearing a leg cast, carrying a briefcase, seen in an alley behind a dormitory the same night as her disappearance. One woman recalled the man asking for help carrying his briefcase to a beetle. At the time, Sparkle was working in Olympia as the assistant director to the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee, where he authored a pamphlet on grape prevention for women. Comes to bear in mind the conversation I had with my husband the other day, where he said, not all men. And I said, this is why we choose the bear. Because we know with the bear, we're getting 3 things. They're either going to leave us alone, they're going to eat us because they're hungry, or they're going to protect their cubs.
I mean, and for the third option, it could be involved with 1 or 2 as well. And like we stated before, with men, our bodies are not safe whether we're alive or deceased.
Yep. Sadly. Although gay men, I do have to say, out of all the gay men that I've known and drag queens, I have not been fearful of myself with them. Ever.
Same. They're the exception.
True. So, he later took a position after this at the Department of Emergency Services, or DES, which was a state agency actively involved in the search for, you ready for this? Missing women. The caucasity, it's on sale. At the DES, Sparkle Tits McGee met Carol Ann Boone, a twice-divorced mother of 2. So, of course, because he works with her, guess who now has a new girlfriend? And on that note, I'll be right back. Did you miss me?
Ways.
Good. I'm sorry, we have to get back to the story. So the two began dating, and Carol would go on to play a vital role in the last chapter of Sparkle's life 6 years later. So news of the brutal attack on Karen and the growing number of missing women dominated headlines and television reports across Washington and Oregon. And that's not why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because people didn't take this seriously enough. So for when all this stuff was happening in California in the early 2000s with women going missing, and they were larger women too. So roughly around my size when I was back then, I was a size 14, 16. We started going in packs. So I would pick my friend up from her house when I was leaving the house in the morning. We would go to school together. We would walk each other to our classes together. And yeah, no, women didn't do that back then. And I was like, why? Travel in pairs, travel in packs. So public fear quickly escalated and the number of women hitchhiking dropped sharply.
Because they didn't do it then, we learned from their mistakes and started implementing it with ourselves and with later generations. Unfortunately, it was a lesson learned.
As pressure mounted on law enforcement and investigators struggled with lack of physical evidence, this severely hindered their progress at all to find anyone who was guilty of this crime. So police were reluctant to share even limited details with the press, fearing it might actually jeopardize the investigation and they might lose everything. At the same time, investigators began noting striking similarities between all of the cases. So you remembered I said he had a Volkswagen Beetle, which we have therapy today. Sorry. And it's great because we're covering a very hard topic. So yay for therapy. So all of the victims had been wearing slacks or blue jeans at the time of their disappearance. So pantaloons. Witnesses also consistently reported seeing a man with brown hair in a cast or in a sling or with crutches driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle near several of the crime scenes. With solid suspect description and a vehicle ID finally in hand, King County Police distributed flyers all across Seattle and the greater King area district. A composite sketch of the suspect was printed in regional newspapers and aired on local TV. Among those who recognized the description sketch as the distinctive Volkswagen Beetle were Elizabeth Cloakfer, Ann Rule, and Department of Emergency Services co-worker and University of Washington psychology professor, all of which all reported Sparkletits McGee as a potential suspect. However, overwhelmed by as many as 200 tips per day, detectives dismissed the idea that a clean-cut law student with no criminal record could be at all held responsible. So August, I thought it was at 4. Did I get the time wrong? Sorry, I got the time wrong. That's because he got a reminder text and I didn't. So Sparkle was accepted once again to the University of Utah Law School, located in Salt Lake City, leaving Elizabeth behind in Seattle. Although he continued to call her regularly, he also began dating at least a dozen other women at this time. As he began his first-year law courses for a second time, Sparkletits quickly became disheartened. He found the material incomprehensible and fell out of his depth, later admitting the other students had some intellectual capacity that I didn't. It was a great disappointment to me. September, which was the following month, a new string of homicides began in Utah. 2 women who would remain unsolved for years, only coming to light when Sparkletits confessed shortly before his execution. September, I already said that. September 2nd of 74, Sparkle essayed and throat hugged a still unidentified hitchhiker in Idaho, which I'll put her information in the moment of silence, like I did last year. So you have all that information of that unidentified hitchhiker. If you have any information, contact people. He returned to the crime scene the following day to photograph and butcher the body before discarding the remains in a nearby river. And I'm so sorry, we are going to have to pause again because I have the bladder of a dehydrated walnut.
I have a pregnant bladder.
That too. my loving and amazing husband did not refill the toilet paper. So I had to run to the other side to find the toilet paper. Anyways. So we left off in September, right? Okay. So September 6th, 2 grouse hunters. I had to actually look up what a grouse was. It's a type of bird. I know it from Brigadoon, but I was like, it's like a snipe. It's not the same thing. No, they actually do exist. And I was like, oh my God, mind blown. Anyways, 2 grouse hunters stumbled upon skeletal remains near a service road in Issaquah, just 2 miles from Lake Summamish. The remains were identified of those Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, who we talked about. Additionally, a femur and several vertebrae which didn't belong to Jan or Denise were discovered. It is believed they belonged to George Ann Hawkins and another missing unidentified woman. The remains have been unofficially documented, meaning Georgianne still remains a missing person to today's date. A month later, October 2nd, Sparkle Tits abducted 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox in Holiday. It's a suburb of Salt Lake City. According later to his confession, Wilcox was walking along a poorly lit main road when he pulled over, forced her into an orchard, and restrained her. He then transported her to an apartment where he claimed to have kept her for 24 hours. He told investigators that he buried her body. Hold on. About my doctor. What? That Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse cookbook? I had that cookbook. It did not survive the fires, but I had that cookbook. It was one of my favorites because they had the original Dole Whip recipe in there. Like how to make the... Oh.
I was just flipping through some of the recipes and I was like, oh, I remember some of these. And some of them you're just like, yeah, no, that's definitely a recipe of the time. Like the friggin' Jello molds and shit. No.
I remember all of these recipes. I want to find this book. The Mickey Mouse sugar cookies, those are the actual sugar cookies they had at Disneyland. So they don't have the Dole Whip recipe in there. That makes me sad. Anyways, so Sparkle told investigators that he buried her body near Capitol Reef National Park, which was about 200 miles south of Holiday, but her remains have never been recovered, and she still remains missing to this day. Only 16 days later, Melissa Ann Smith disappeared after leaving a pizza parlor around 9:30 p.m. She was only 17 at the time of her disappearance, and she was the daughter of a Midvale chief of police who warned her of the dangers of what was going on. So Midvale is a Salt Lake City suburb. October 27th, just 9 short days later.
Ignore what I'm doing. Just keep going.
Okay. Her unclothed body was found by a deer hunter on a hillside in Summit Park, Utah. She had been SA'd on both ends, and her case was, her cause of death was believed to have multiple brain hemorrhages after suffering blows to her head, but one of her stockings was around her neck, suggesting she was also throat hugged, which you and I both know that tends to be a constant thing with the cornflake unalivers that we discuss on this show. There we go. I was like, I can't see shit. Everything is in the way. Note, it was believed that she had passed away a couple of days after she had disappeared, meaning she was held captive for multiple days. This is changing his MO, because he went from immediately unaliving them to keeping them. Melissa's case received extensive newspaper coverage before and after she was found, probably because she was, it was in the 70s, she was white, and it was the police chief's daughter. She was also the second of 5 teenage girls to disappear in that area in Utah. All of the cases were believed to be connected. October 31st, another 17-year-old girl by the name of Laura Ann Aim also disappeared about 25 miles away. Laura was staying in numerous places with friends at the time of her unaliving, so she was couch hopping. On Halloween, she was attending a party, and shortly after midnight, on the morning of November 1st, she left a party planning to hitchhike home. She was never seen from again, and her unclothed body was found by hikers 9 miles or 14 kilometers to the northeast in American Fork Canyon on Thanksgiving Day. So that's almost a month later. She was essayed front and back, and her face was beaten beyond recognition. She was also throat hugged with her stockings. She was believed to have died the week prior to Thanksgiving, meaning she was held captive the longest out of all of the victims. The reason I'm saying front and back is because I don't want to say the other word. I'm already saying she's essayed, guys. I don't want to say the other word. November 8th, in the late afternoon, Sparkle Tits approached his next victim. Her name was Carol De La Roche. She was 18 years old and a telephone operator at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray. This was less than a mile from the Midvale restaurant where Melissa was last seen. He identified himself to her as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department and told Carol that someone had attempted to break into her car and asked her to accompany him to the station to file a complaint. When she had pointed out to Sparkle that he was driving on a road that did not lead to the station, he immediately pulled onto the shoulder and attempted to handcuff her. During their struggle, he inadvertently fastened both handcuffs to the same wrist, and Carol was able to open the car door and escape. She survived, and later that evening, another girl was taken. Her name was Deborah Jean Kent. Deborah Kent was a 17-year-old student at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, which is 20 miles or 30 kilometers north of the city of Murray. Deborah was last seen at Viewmont High School. She had left at approximately 10:30 p.m. from a theater production at the school pickup for her brother near the Rustic roller rink, but she was never seen from again. Do you see the photo? You didn't see any of the last 3 photos I sent you. Oh, wait.
No, I did.
It shows sent. It doesn't show that you actually looked at them. Sorry.
Because I have the chat open up.
Oh, on your computer, and it's just the my bad. Okay. So the school's drama teacher and student told the police that a stranger had each asked one of them to the parking lot. So asked all of them to come out to the parking lot to identify a car. According to eyewitnesses, there was a loud screaming coming from the parking lot of the school around the time that Deborah was last seen. I have to lean back a little bit. So I'm going to bring this forward just a tad more. All right. So one person saw a light-colored Volkswagen Bug speeding away from the school. Another student saw the same man pacing in the rear of the auditorium, and the drama teacher spotted him again shortly before the end of the play. Outside the auditorium, investigators found a key that unlocked the handcuffs removed from Carol's wrist. Eventually, Sparkle admitted to abducting Deborah and keeping her at his apartment for a day, stating she was alive at least during half of it. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have been better if she was alive for all of it and was still alive, but, not his MO.
Right. So, just before his unaliving in 1989, Sparkle Tits McGee confessed to the unaliving of Deborah. He led authorities to where he claimed to have put her body in the Fairview Canyon area of Fairview, Utah. Before he would be put to death, he identified where he had hidden the remains by pointing to an area on the map that he had torn from an atlas. Minimal skeletal remains were found. The only human bone that was found was a patella, or her kneecap, which was assumed to have been Deborah's and given to her family. However, because investigators were unable to get DNA from the remains, they were unable to confirm the identification. After going through the missing person report, it was noted that Kent's mother had the kneecap, which authorities at the time did not know about. The remains were sent to the University of North Texas and finally identified as Deborah in 2015.
So many unanswered questions.
But thankfully to DNA, as there is a resurgence in new technology, we are getting those answers now. So we talked about Elizabeth earlier. Elizabeth Knopfler, not Klopfer, right?
Don't ask me how to pronounce things.
So in November, Liz called King County Police a second time after rereading that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. This is after her and several other people had already called the police and said, hey, look at Sparkle Tits. Something's going on with him.
But no, because he's a palm-colored, ticks all the correct boxes male. Couldn't have been him. Oh, no.
Of course. So Detective Randy Hergesheimer of the Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Sparkle Tits McGee had risen considerably in the King County hierarchy of suspicion, so he had gone from the bottom of the list to the top. But the Lake Sammamish witness considered most reliable by detectives failed to identify him in a photo lineup. You guys have to remember, those are not 100% effective because people have what's known as facial blindness, especially when it comes to CPTSD and PTSD. And, as somebody who was a supporter of someone else who went through this process with a serial graper in California, she was like, I can't remember his face. And I said, yes, I know that. However, you remembered the back of his neck. And I was like, if you show her the back of those guys' necks, she will point them out. I guarantee you. And she did. She was like, I'll do it in court too. But because of the trauma, your brain automatically removes that person's face from your memory, or it burns it into your memory. It's one or the other.
Usually if it tries to have you forget it, it's usually because your brain is trying to rewire itself to protect yourself.
Exactly. So after this, November 20th, the Med Examiner estimated that Laura had died on November 20th, which was 20 days after her disappearance. Laura had been brutalized, essayed front and back, and strangled, and throat hugged with nylon stockings. Many years later, Sparkle Tits described his post-mortem rituals with the bodies of Melissa and Laura, including hair shampooing and application of makeup. just gives me the heebies. December, Elizabeth called the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office again and repeated her suspicion, saying, "Hey, look at Sparkle Tits McGee." So Sparkle's name was added to their list of suspects, but at that time, no forensics evidence linked him to the Utah unalivings. This is all in 74. So 75, in January, Sparkle Tits returned to Seattle after his law school final exams and spent a week with Liz, who did not tell him that she had reported him to the police on 3 occasions. She made plans to visit him in Salt Lake City in August. But January, Karen Eileen Campbell, who was born on September 20th, 1951 in Garden City, Michigan. She was a registered nurse and living in Dearborn, Michigan at the time of her unaliving. January 12th, 75, she was staying with her fiance and his children at the Wildwood Inn in Snowmass Village, Colorado. They had dinner at the restaurant, and then they finished at about 8:30 p.m. She excused herself to get a magazine from their room. She was seen walking down a well-lit hallway, but never returned. So on February 17th, her unclothed and frozen body was discovered near a dirt road just outside the resort. She had a distinctive grooved depression on her skull, making it clear she was brutalized. Her left earlobe had been torn, and she had numerous deep wounds from a weapon on her butt. February 18th, she was identified primarily via dental records. The initial aftermath of her unaliving is unknown, but it would remain unsolved for months. March, 6 months after the 2 grouse hunters stumbled upon Janice and Denise, forestry students from the Green River Community College discovered the skulls and mandibles of Linda Ann Healy, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, and Brenda Ball on Taylor Mountain. And this was the area east of Issaquah, where Sparkle Tits McGee often hiked for enjoyment. Donna Mason's remains were never recovered. March 15th, Julie Lyle Cunningham, she will be known as the 14th victim of Sparkle Tits McGee. She was born on January 10th of 1949 in Winchester, Massachusetts. She had lived in Vail, Colorado for years prior to her unaliving. She worked as a ski instructor at a ski shop. At 26 years old, she disappeared. She left her apartment to go to a nearby tavern for a dinner date with a friend, but she never showed. And she was never seen or heard from again. The initial aftermath of Julie's disappearance is unknown, but she wasn't the first woman to disappear in Colorado at the time. 2 months prior, Karen Campbell was also unalived in Colorado. Julie's presumed unaliver would later be identified as Sparkle Tits McGee, who was first apprehended in 1975. So we're getting close to the end here, guys. Stay with me. You guys have been so good so far, and I will reward you with brownie point. Sparkle later told Colorado investigators that he approached Julie on crutches and asked her to help him carry his ski boots to his car. He confessed to Julie's unaliving, claiming he posed as an injured skier and lured her to his car, asking her to help him with his ski boots. This is where he clubbed and handcuffed her before essaying her at a secondary site near Rifle, which was 90 miles or 140 kilometers west of Vail. At one point, Julie woke up and tried to escape, but he caught her and throat hugged her, unaliving her in the process. Weeks later, he made the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City to revisit her remains. He also claimed that he buried her body near Rife, Colorado. He described the gravesite as being high desert area with some large trees and a circular driveway. A team of experts who specialized in the discovery of remains traveled to an area that matched to the T to the location of Julie's gravesite to try and find her remains. They brought a bloodhound and cadaver dogs, but were unable to find anything. April 6th, we meet Denise Lynn Ulverson. I'm talking an awful lot here, guys, and I apologize. I don't, because now I'm getting this out of the way. You're welcome, Trey.
I mean, that's why I did the ones I did first. That way, ripping off the Band-Aid and going ahead and getting these out of the way so we can do the lesser of the evils later.
What is it with your friend requesting the most gruesome, heinous BS?
Why do you think he's one of my friends?
Okay, fair point.
I'm just saying.
I know. So, Denise Lynn Ulverson was born August 10th, 1950 in Grand Junction, Colorado. She married in September of 1970, and on April 6th, she had an argument with her husband and planned to ride her bike to her parents' home to cool down, but she never arrived. She disappeared near the Utah-Colorado border in Grand Junction. Her husband just assumed that she had stayed the night at her parents' home when she didn't come home, because that did happen often if they did fight. Denise's bike and sandals were found under a viaduct near a railroad bridge, which is near the Colorado River. For those of you who don't know what a viaduct is, it's like a tunnel under a bridge that, it looks like a hobbit hole. That's a viaduct. Sparkles confessed to her unaliving, claiming that he abducted her during her bike ride and unalived her in his car. He dumped her remains in the Colorado River, but he didn't confess to essaying her, which is part of his pattern and motive. This admission was supported by gas receipts, which showed that he was in the city on the same day and the same time that she went missing. Sadly, her remains were never found. May 6th, this one was one of the hardest ones for me to see. And by see, I mean when I was looking at the research. Lynette Dawn Culver was born in Renton, Washington, July 31st of 62. 62. She was 12.
She was just a baby.
She had an older sibling. When Lynette was about 5, her family moved to Idaho. Before her disappearance, she was described as a usual preteen and that she had no problems attending school and she had never skipped. Lynette was last seen in Pocatello, Idaho on May 6th of 75. She left her school during a lunch break and then boarded a bus and was never seen from again. January of 1989, Sparkle Tits confessed to unaliving her as a girl that matched her description. He parked outside the Alameda Junior High in Pocatello, Idaho, which was 160 miles or 255 kilometers north of Salt Lake City. After seeing 12-year-old Lynette walking alone, he lured her to his vehicle before driving her to his Holiday Inn hotel. That is where he essayed her and then drowned her in the bathtub. He disposed of her body in a river north of Pocatello. While he never named the river, it matches the description of the Snake River. He also reported intimate details about Lynette's personal life in his confession. At the time of the confession, police believed Sparkle unalived Lynette due to him describing her personal life, but modern investigators have challenged this. They claim Lynette was the first victim in a string of abductions and unalivings in Pocatello between 78 and 83. Just after Lynette was reported missing, they just assumed she had just run away because of her age. As time passed, without any reported sightings, police began to suspect foul play in her disappearance. Also, on May 3rd, Sparkle's former co-worker for the Washington State Department of Emergency Services, Carol Ann Boone, visited him in Salt Lake City and stayed for a week at his apartment. In June, Sparkle Tits traveled to Seattle to spend a week with Elizabeth. During this visit, the two even discussed a possibility of getting married that coming Christmas. Once again, Elizabeth didn't mention she had repeatedly spoken with authorities in King County and Salt Lake County. For this part, Sparkle Tits failed to disclose not only his ongoing relationship with Carol Ann, but also a simultaneous romance with the University of Utah law student identified later in various accounts as either Sharon Auer or Kim Andrews. On June 28th, we have Susan Sue Curtis. She was born on May 18th, 1960 in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was living in Bountiful, Utah, which really is a beautiful place. At the time of her disappearance and subsequent unaliving, she had a history of runaway from home, and she always returned after a few days. So this was her MO, is that she would leave for a few days at a time and then. On June 27th, 1975, she rode her bike to Provo, Utah, as she was attending the Bountiful Orchard Youth Conference at Brigham Young University, which lasted 2 days. For those of you who don't know, that is the Mormon University. That evening, a formal banquet was held at the Wilkinson Student Center. She excused herself from the banquet to walk to her dormitory to brush her teeth. As one does.
I mean, we love good dental hygiene.
As someone who worked for a dentist, yes, please. She left the banquet and was never seen or heard from again. After she disappeared, police immediately determined Sue had likely never arrived at her dorm room, as her toothbrush was dry. Sue was not believed to have been abducted, as she was a chronic runaway and allegedly was seen at a university class 4 days later trying to sell a textbook. The professor identified Sue as the girl from the photo, but it wasn't Sue. She had disappeared from campus, which was located 45 miles south of Salt Lake City. Her unaliving would later become Sparkle Tits' final confession, recording literally moments before he was led to the execution chamber. He confessed to her unaliving, claiming to have buried her body along a highway near Price, Utah. While he didn't confess to essaying her, it was part of his motives, and her remains have never been uncovered or recovered. So, we are in Utah. We're going to go back to Washington. Are you ready? We're nearing the end. Okay. So, investigators are still struggling with the case backlog, trying to make sense of the Pacific Northwest murder spree, which had ended as suddenly as it began. Faced with an overwhelming volume of data, they turned to what was an innovative approach, compiling a computer database. Using the King County payroll computer, a massive outdated machine by today's standards, but the only one available for the data they needed to put in. They inputted various lists, including classmates, acquaintances of victims, Volkswagen owners named Ted, and known sex offenders in the area. They then searched the database for overlapping names. Out of thousands, only 26 appeared on at least 4 of the lists, and one, which was Sparkle Tits McGee Bundy. Detectives also created a manually compiled list of their top 100 suspects. His name was on that list too, literally the top of the pile, as one investigator had said on the news. So August 1975, Sparkle Tits was finally arrested by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward in the suburb of Granger near Salt Lake City.
It's about damn time.
It's about that time. Officer Hayward had spotted Sparkle driving suspiciously through a residential neighborhood in his Beetle during the pre-dawn hours. When he saw the patrol car, he sped off, prompting Hayward to pursue and stop him. Inside the vehicle, the officer noted that the front passenger seat had been removed and placed in the back, an unusual setup for a Beetle. The search of the car turned up several troubling items: a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, crowbar, handcuffs, plastic trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and many other items that initially appeared to be burglary tools. He claimed that the ski mask was for skiing and he had found the handcuffs in a dumpster and dismissed the rest as ordinary household objects. Make it make sense, people. However, Detective Jerry Thompson recognized the suspect description and vehicle matching those from an attempted kidnapping of Carol DeRanch the previous November and recalled Sparkle Tit's name from a tip called in by Elizabeth. A subsequent search of his apartment turned up more disturbing clues: a guide to Colorado ski resorts with a check mark next to the Wildwood Inn, which is where Karen Campbell had disappeared, a brochure for Viewmont High School play in Bountiful, where Deborah Kent had vanished. Despite the mounting suspicions, detectives lacked enough evidence to hold him, and he was released on his own recognizance. Years later, Sparkle Tits McGee admitted that investigators had missed his stash of Polaroid photos of his victims, which he had hidden in his apartments, images he finally destroyed after his release from police custody. After Sparkle's arrest, Salt Lake City police placed him under 24-hour surveillance, where Detective Thompson and two other investigators traveled to Seattle to interview Elizabeth. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can, but making it hard to breathe. So, we're going to keep going. She revealed a disturbing list of items that she had found over the past year, both in her home and in his apartment, which she had access to. These were all things she couldn't explain. One of them was crutches, a bag of plaster of Paris, which he later admitted to stealing from a medical supply surplus store, and a meat cleaver, which had never been used for cooking. She also mentioned surgical gloves, an oriental style knife, and a wooden case that he kept in his glove compartment, and a sack filled with women's clothes.
That's a very odd combination of items to not be guilty.
So Liz said Sparkle Tits was constantly in debt, and she suspected he had stolen most of his valuable possessions. And when she questioned him about the new TV and stereo, he snapped, "If you tell anyone, I'll break your forking neck." She also noted that he became visibly agitated when she mentioned cutting her hair, which was long, parted in the middle, matching the appearance of all of his victims. On several occasions, she woke at night to find him beneath the bed covers with a flashlight, quietly inspecting her body. Disturbingly, he had kept a lug wrench, which was taped midway up the handle in the trunk of of the Volkswagen Beetle, which he borrowed often, claiming it was, quote, for protection. Investigators confirmed that he had not been with Liz on any of the nights of the Pacific Northwest victims' disappearances, nor on the day Janice Ott or Denise Nashland disappeared from the Lake Samish State Park. Shortly afterward, Liz was interviewed again, this time by the Seattle homicide detective Kathy McChesney, who informed her of Sparkle's brief engagement to another woman identified as Diane Edwards around the Christmas of '73. September, Sparkle Tits sold his Volkswagen Beetle to a teenager in Midvale. Utah police quickly impounded the car, and FBI technicians meticulously dismantled and searched it. Inside, they discovered hair strands matching samples taken from Karen Campbell. Additional hairs were later identified as microscopically indistinguishable from those of Melissa Smith and Carol DeRonch. Because remember, Carol's the one that got away. According to FBI lab specialist Robert Neal, the likelihood of finding hair in one car that matched 3 unrelated victims, in his words, were a coincidence of mind-boggling rarity. October 2nd, detectives placed Sparkle Tits McGee into a police lineup. Carol DeRonch immediately identified him as Officer Roseland, the man who attempted to abduct her, and multiple witnesses from the Bountiful play recognized him as the suspicious stranger seen at Viewmont High School auditorium. Although it was still not enough evidence to charge him in the disappearance of Deborah Kent, whose body had yet to be found, there was more than enough to indict him for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in the DeRonch case. He denied knowing DeRonch, but could not offer an alibi. He was released on a $15,000 bail paid by his parents and spent most of his time between his indictment and trial back in Seattle, living with Liz. Seattle police didn't have enough to formally charge him in the Pacific Northwest unalivings, but they maintained heavy surveillance. Liz later recalled, when Ted and I stepped out onto the porch to go somewhere, there were so many unmarked police cars that started up that it sounded like the beginning of the Indy 500. November, the 3 lead investigators, Jerry Thompson from Utah. Jerry Thompson from Utah, Robert Keppel from Washington, and Michael Fisher from Colorado all met in Aspen, Colorado, where they exchanged case file details with 30 detectives and prosecutors across 5 states. The meeting, later dubbed the Aspen Summit, left officials confident that Sparkle Tits McGee was the unaliver that they had been chasing. Still, they agreed that solid admissible evidence was needed before unaliving charges could be filed. So, it's been 2 years. This whole ordeal, 2 years, okay? 1976, February, he finally stood trial for the attempted kidnapping of Carol DeRonch. And everybody knows that picture of Carol where she's smirking at Sparkle and she winks and smiles. That's not her flirting. That's her saying, haha, I got you, Forker. Like pretty much giving him the middle finger. Following his attorney, John O'Connell's advice, he waived his right to a jury trial due to the intense public publicity surrounding the case. After 4 hours of testimony and weekend deliberation, Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. found him guilty of kidnapping and assault. After some initial resistance, he waived extradition and was transferred to Aspen in January of 1977. It's now starting to get really good. Are you ready for this? Because it's going to get even better.
Hi, Captain.
On June 7th of 1977, Sparkle Tits McGee was transported 40 miles from the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen for a preliminary hearing. Confident of his, I just sounded like Kermit the Frog, preliminary hearing. Confident in his own legal prowess, he chose to act as his own attorney and therefore excused by the judge from wearing handcuffs or leg shackles. During a recess, he requested access to the courthouse law library to research his case. Seizing the opportunity, he slipped behind a bookcase out of the guard's sight, opened a second-story window, and jumped to the ground, injuring his right ankle in the process. After shedding an outer layer of clothing, Sparkle Tits limped through Aspen just as roadblocks were being set up on the town's outskirts. Undeterred, he hiked up Aspen Mountain. Near the summit, he broke into a hunting cabin, stole food and clothing and a rifle. The next day, he left the cabin aimed for the crested butte, but quickly got lost in the dense forest. For 2 days, he wandered aimlessly, missing 2 trails that would have led him safely down the mountain. June 10th, he broke into a camping trailer at Maroon Lake, about 10 miles south of Aspen, taking food and a ski parka. Rather than continuing south, he inexplicably doubled back north towards Aspen, managing to evade roadblocks, and search parties. And I'm saying this is getting good because he's dumb. The 13th, 3 days later, cold, sleep deprived, still hobbling on his sprained ankle, he stole a car near Aspen Golf Course. Driving erratically, weaving across lanes, he caught the attention of 2 police officers who pulled him over. After 6 days, he was caught. His escape was over. In the car were maps of the mountain area of Aspen, maps prosecutors were using to pinpoint the location of Karen Campbell's body. Since he was representing himself, he had access to these documents confirming that this poorly executed getaway was carefully planned. So he had access to the maps so he could get away. Back in Glenwood Springs jail, Sparkle Tits ignored the warning of friends and legal advisors to lay low. Despite a shaky case against him, things were steadily tipping in his favor. Pretrial motions consistently swung his way. Key pieces of evidence were ruled inadmissible. A more rational defendant might have realized he had a real shot at an acquittal, observers had said. With as little as a year and a half left to serve on the DeRanch conviction, he could have been freed if he just played it smart. But of course he didn't, because he had to FAFO. He cooked up a... Because what?
Because he had all the audacity.
Of course he did, because caucasity was on sale. So he cooked up a new escape plan. Over 6 months, he smuggled in $500, mostly thanks to visits from Carol Ann Boone, and got his hands on a hacksaw blade from fellow inmates. Using a detailed floor plan of the Garfield County Jail, he spent his evenings sawing a hole about a square foot between the steel bars of his cell ceiling. In late 1977, in December, his trial became the talk of Aspen, and he filed to move the trial venue to Denver, but the judge instead sent it to Colorado Springs, where juries have a reputation for being tough on unalivers. On the night of December 30th, most of the jail staff was off for Christmas, and non-violent prisoners were sent home on furlough. That was the ice cube maker. I was like, what the fork? So, of course, that's when he staged his escape because he's the only one in there. He piled books and files on his bed and covered them with a blanket to mimic a sleeping body. Having lost 35 pounds, he managed to wiggle through and explored the crawl space above where he had cut a hole. Breaking through the ceiling into the chief jailer's apartment, which happened to be empty at the time, slipped into the crawl space, grabbed street clothes from the closet, and strolled right out the forking front door. Despite multiple reports from an informant about movement in the ceiling at night, jail officials didn't look. So, January of 78, from Chicago, Sparkle took a train from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he was spotted in a local tavern on the 2nd. Excuse me. We're so close to the end, guys. I know I keep saying that, but we really are. I'm going through this as quick as I can. 5 days later, he stole a car and drove south to Atlanta, Georgia. After stealing the car, he headed east on Interstate 70, but the car soon broke down in the mountains. A passing motorist gave him a lift into Vail, about 60 miles away, and from there, he caught a bus to Denver and then a morning flight to Chicago. Back in Glenwood Springs, the understaffed jail didn't realize he was gone until noon December of the 31st, over 17 hours after the escape.
Okay, so started off in Colorado Springs, went all the way to Athens, Georgia.
He was driving towards Athens.
Okay.
Atlanta, not Athens.
So he went, how far away did he get? It doesn't say. Okay, because I'm like, I'm thinking he got like past the Mississippi River, car broke down, comes all the way back kind of thing. Okay, no, didn't do that. All right, cool.
He barely got far before the car broke down.
Oh, okay, cool.
Car soon broke down in the mountains. So he's still in Vail. So like it's just outside of Vail.
There's a lot of mountains, okay?
Right. So so he got a lift into Vail, 60 miles away from where he was at, got a bus to Denver, morning flight to Chicago. From there, he caught a bus to Tallahassee, Florida on the morning of the 8th. He spent one night in a hotel before renting a room under the alias Chris Hagen at a boarding house near Florida State University. Sparkle later claimed that he initially planned to find legitimate work and keep a low profile, convinced he could stay free and off radar and unnoticed in Florida indefinitely as long as he didn't attract police attention. However, his attempt at a job application at a construction site was quickly abandoned when they asked for photo ID. Falling back on his old tricks, he resumed to shoplifting and stealing money and credit cards from women's wallets left unattended in grocery carts. In the early hours of the 15th, mind you, he's been on the lam for 15 days, okay? Just a week after landing in Tallahassee, Sparkle Tits broke into FSU's Chi Omega sorority house through a back door with a faulty lock. 4 women ended up dying that night. Margaret Elizabeth Bowman was born on January 6, 1957 in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was attending FSU in Tallahassee. She believed to have been attacked about 2:45 while she was sleeping. Not only was she abused with a piece of oak firewood, she was then throat hugged with nylons while he essayed her. Margaret and Lisa, her roommate, their unalivings, along with the attacks of 3 other women, rocked the area. The crime was to be committed within 15 minutes total. And in the immediate days after, the motive was determined to be sexual in nature, but the perpetrator remained unidentified. Lisa, the roommate, born January 6, 1957, in St. Petersburg, Florida. She was attending FSU. He had abused her and left her unconscious, essayed her with a Pyramist bottle, and then throat hugged her. One of her nip knops was torn, and her left booty had a deep bite mark on it. And literally, I wrote those words into the document so that way I didn't say the other words. Lisa was one of the only victims whose unalivings was ever charged by Sparkle because the mark on her left buttock matched his dental records. In the next bedroom, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler were still asleep. He brutally assaulted them, and Kathy suffered a broken jaw and a deep shoulder laceration, while Karen had a concussion, a broken jaw, lost teeth, and a crushed finger. Both women survived. Kathy later credited their rescue to car headlights shining through the window and scaring the attacker off of them. Florida Tallahassee detectives determined all 4 attacks took less than 15 minutes, occurred within earshot over 30 people who heard nothing and left a chilling silence in its wake. In the same night, Sparkle Tits then broke into the basement apartment 8 blocks away of Cheryl Thomas. She was 21 years old, leaving her with a dislocated shoulder, a fractured jaw, and skull fractures so severe they caused permanent deafness in her left ear and ended her dance career. Police found a semen stain and a pantyhose mask containing hairs matching Sparkle Tits in her bedroom. February 8th, Sparkle Tits drove 150 miles or 240 kilometers east to Jacksonville in a stolen FSU van. 14-year-old Leslie Harmeter, the daughter of the Jacksonville Police Department's chief of detectives, identifying himself as Richard Burton Fire Department, but retreated when Parmenter's old brother arrived and confronted him. That afternoon, he backtracked 60 miles, 97 kilometers, to Lake City. So on February 9th, Kimberly Diane Leach, who was born October 28th, 65 in Lake City. I tried to look up anything about her, and nothing was available online. Just like a couple of the earlier women, she was very young, very, very young. She called her homeroom to retrieve her purse that was left behind on February 9th, 1978. She never returned back to class to get her purse. She was last seen being lured to a white van by an unknown man. The initial aftermath of Kimberly's disappearance is unknown, but she was believed to have been abducted, so an extensive search was commenced. Sparkle was known to have stolen a white van that matched the description of the one that Kim was last seen being led to. Marks inside the van led police to believe that something heavy was dragged from it. When the van was found, dirt and oak leaves were discovered inside and identified the type of tree the soil came from, which led them to Suwannee River State Park, which is, I think, one of the river parks that they have the manatee, the swim manatees at.
The Florida State song used to be Suwannee River.
Suwannee River. No. So February 12th, with insufficient cash to pay his overdue rent and growing suspicion that police were closing in, Sparkle Tits stole a car and fled Tallahassee, driving westward across the Panhandle. 3 days later, at 1 a.m., he was stopped by Pensacola police officer David Lee near the Alabama state line after a wants and warrants check showed his Volkswagen Beetle being stolen. When he was told he was being under arrest, he kicked Lee's legs out from under him and took off running. Lee fired 2 warning shots, gave chase, tackled him. The two struggled over his gun before the officer finally subdued and arrested Sparkle Tits McGee. In a stolen vehicle, there were 3 sets of IDs belonging to female FSU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen TV set. Those suckers were big back in the day. They also found in the car a pair of dark-rimmed, non-prescription glasses, a pair of plaid slacks, later identified as a disguise worn by Richard Burton Fire Department in Jacksonville. As Officer Lee transported his subject to jail, unaware that he was arrested as one of FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, he heard him say, quote, "I wish you just would have killed me." So March, 7 weeks later, after an intensive search, Kimberly's partially mummified remains were actually found in a pig farrowing shed near Suwannee River State Park, which was 35 miles, 56 kilometers northwest of Lake City. Forensics experts surmised that Leach had been essayed before having her throat cut and her parts mutilated. I'm not going to go into detail. You don't need to know that. There are other podcasts for that if you want to go there. May of 78, the Florida grand jury indicted Sparkle Tits McGee on charges of first-degree unaliving, attempted first-degree unaliving, and burglary for the Chi Omega sorority attacks. June of 79, he finally stood trial in the Florida Circuit Court for Dade County and Judge Edward Cowart presiding. The case drew massive media attention with 250 reporters from across 5 continents, covering, not consonants or vowels, consonants and vowels, continents covering what first became the first nationally televised trial in United States history. Despite being assigned 5 court-appointed attorneys, he insisted on directing much of his own defense. From the onset, author Stephen G. Nelson, we talked about him at the beginning, he said he sabotaged the entire defense effort out of spite, distrust, and grandiose delusion. Theodore Bundy was facing murder charges with a possible death sentence, and all that mattered to him apparently was that he be in control, end quote. Tallahassee public defender Mike Minerva, a member for the defense. That's the river?
That's the Swanee River State Park, where the red dot is and how far away it is from Tallahassee. It's like almost 3 hours from me.
That's not far.
No, not at all. It's in between. It is almost directly in between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. So it made sense that he bounced between the two.
So Tallahassee public defender Mike Minerva is a member of the defense team, later revealed that the pre-trial plea bargain had been arranged. And under the deal, he would have to plead guilty to the unalivings of Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, and Kimberly Leach in exchange for a guaranteed 75-year life sentence. Prosecutors reportedly concerned about the possibility of losing at trial were open to agreement. He viewed the plea not just as a way to avoid the electric chair, but as a calculated legal maneuver. He would plead guilty, wait for evidence to degrade and witnesses to vanish or recant, then attempt to overturn the plea and pursue an acquittal down the line. But at the 11th hour, he balked, quoting, "It made him realize he was going to have to stand up in front of the whole world and say he was guilty," Minerva said. He just couldn't do it. At trial, pivotal testimony came from the Chi Omega sorority members Connie Hastings, who placed Sparkle Tits near the sorority house that night, and Nita Neary, who witnessed him leaving the building holding the murder weapon. Damning physical evidence, including bite marks that he left on Lisa Levy's butt, impressions of that forensic odontologists Robert Soivern and Lowell Levine matched precisely to the casting of his teeth. The jury also heard details of his prior kidnappings of Carol Duranch, and after less than 7 hours of deliberation, found him guilty on July 24th, 1979 of the unalivings of Margaret Bowman, Lisa Libby, and 3 counts of attempted first-degree unalivings of Kathy Kleiner, Karen Chandler, and Cheryl Thomas, and 2 counts of burglary. Judge Edward Cowart imposed the death penalty for the Schmurder convictions. His appeal to the Florida Supreme Court was denied. 6 months later, he faced a second trial in Orlando, Florida. For what, you may ask? Well, it was the time that he abducted and unalived 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Once again, the jury returned a guilty verdict. This time, it was less than 8 hours of deliberation. Oh, it's my Flocka from Virginia, Selena. Nothing better than Selena's. Yeah. Years of trauma in Catholic school. Anyways, a key witness testified to seeing Sparkle leading Leach from the schoolyard towards his stolen van. Remember the FSU van? Investigators also presented fiber evidence. Unusually manufactured clothing fibers found in both the van and on Leach's remains matched the jacket that he was wearing at the time of his arrest. During the penalty phase of the Kimberly Leach trial, he exploited an obscure Florida statute stating that a declaration of marriage in court in the presence of a judge constituted as a legally binding marriage. Hold on. While questioning Carol Ann Boone, his longtime supporter who had moved to Florida to attend his trials and testified on his behalf, he asked her to marry him. Boone said yes, and Sparkle Tits declared them legally wed right there in the courtroom.
That's not how that works.
It did at that time because there was a loophole in the Florida state statute.
Like, I know, like, the whole, like, husbands and wives can't testify against each other, but just, like, I feel like there has to be paperwork done. But I guess he's playing on loopholes because that's how he skated through life.
As one does. So, February 10th, 1980, Sparkle Tits McGee received his third death sentence. Upon hearing the ruling, he stood and yelled, "Tell the jury they're wrong!" That sentence would ultimately be the one carried out nearly 9 years later. Only his mother, Louise, appeared in court to plead for his life. And on October 24th, 1981, Carol Boone gave birth to their daughter, Rose Bundy. Although conjugal visits were not permitted in Florida State Prison in Rayford, inmates were known to bribe guards to allow brief moments of privacy with their free male visitors, causing Carol to get pregnant. Shortly after the Leach trial wrapped and the long appeal process kicked off, Sparkle Tits McGee began a process of serious interviews with journalists Stephen Machown and Hugh Ainsworth. See, I told you we were going to talk about them again. So, to dodge what he called the stigma of confession, Sparkle Tits spoke mainly in third person, but for the first time began offering insight into his crimes and his twisted thought process. He admitted to a long history of theft, confirming that Liz had long suspected that nearly everything of value he had owned, he had stolen. The big payoff for me was actually possessing whatever I had stolen. I really enjoyed having something that I wanted. I'd gone out and taken. The idea of possession became central for his motivations of SA and unalivings. He had stated that SA satisfied the craving to totally possess his victims. And at first, he claimed to unalive people simply out of expediency, a way to avoid being caught. Over time, the unaliving itself became part of a thrill. The ultimate possession was, in fact, taking of the life, and then the physical possession of the remains. He also opened up to the FBI BAU, Special Agent William Hagemeyer. He noted that Sparkle Tits took almost a spiritual pleasure in unaliving people. He recalled, quote, Sparkle said that after a while, unaliving is not just a crime of lust or violence. It becomes a possession. They're part of you. The victim becomes part of you. And that you two are forever one, and the grounds where you unalive them or leave them become sacred to you, and you will always come back to them. According to Sparkle, his early unalivings were sloppy, impulsive, and he even called them amateur hour. By the time he unalived Linda in 1974, he claimed to have entered what he described as his prime or predator phase. This, of course, strongly hinted that he began unaliving people well before 74, though he never flat out admitted it or admitted to any of his victims. July of 84, prison guards discovered 2 hacksaw blades hidden in his cell. A steel bar of one of the cell's windows had been completely sawed through at both ends and glued back into place with homemade adhesive made from soap. A few months later, he was moved to a different cell after guards found an unauthorized mirror. Not long after, he was charged with a disciplinary infraction, sending an unauthorized correspondence to another famous inmate, John Hinckley Jr. October of 1984, he contacted Robert Keppel, the detective, offering his supposed expertise in cornflake unaliver psychology to assist in the hunt for the Green River Killer, who was Gary Ridgway, which we covered last year. Detective Keppel and Detective Reichart from the Green River Task Force interviewed him, but Ridgway would remain unidentified for another 17 years after that. Keppel later published detailed accounts of the interviews and corroborated with Stephen Michaud and on further analysis of the material. In the early 80s, Oh, wait, I just went on to a whole thing with the Green River Killer, so I'm just going to. So that said, Sparkle's interviews did offer quite a few things to these detectives. He offered firsthand perspective of a necrophiliac cornflake unaliver. I got it.
I was going to say just roll with cornflake, so.
Cornflake! Help train law enforcement in behavioral analysis and contribute to the evolution of crime profiling in the FBI's BAU. In early 86, the execution date was set for March 4th, related to the Chi Omega unalivings. Although the U.S. Supreme Court issued a brief stay, the date was quickly rescheduled to April. Then July. He began confessing in depth to FBI agent William Hagemeyer and author Michaud. He described in graphic detail how he revisited multiple sites, Taylor Mountain, Issaquah, and others, several times to lie with the victims' bodies and perform acts until decomposition made it unbearable. I went into further detail, got disgusted, and deleted the whole thing. And I said, future Catherine, you're welcome.
Current Rachel appreciates past Catherine.
Current Catherine appreciates past Catherine. That was back before I became Prego Maego. So, in Utah, he applied makeup to Melissa Smith's face and repeatedly washed Laura Ames' hair. If you got time, they can be anything you want them to be. He admitted to decapitating around 12 of his victims and using a hacksaw, and said he kept at least one group of Anne Boleyn's.
I was going to say souvenirs, but we'll go with that.
Anne Boleyn's is safer. They believe these were those of Rancourt, Parks, Ball, and Healy, stored in his apartment before disposing of them. July 2nd, less than 15 hours before his scheduled unaliving, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals issued another stay and sent the case back to district court in Florida, citing unresolved issues about his mental competency and jury instructions in the penalty phase. A new examination date, this time for Leach's murder, was set for November 18th, but the court issued yet another stay the day before he was supposed to be executed. So, 1987, Sparkle and other family members painted a far darker picture of his life for the attorneys. Described his dad as tyrannical bully who abused his wife, his dog, swung neighborhood cats by their tails, and expressed overtly racist and xenophobic views. In one incident, he allegedly threw his daughter Julia down a flight of stairs for oversleeping. He was also said to speak aloud to unseen presences and once flew into a violent rage when the subject of his father or parentage actually came up. Psychologist Al Carlisle believed that he started fantasizing about women he saw while window peeping or elsewhere, mimicking the accents of some politicians he listened to on the radio. In essence, he was fantasizing about being someone else, someone important. That August, he was baptized by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, he showed little commitment to the faith, rarely attending services and disregarding most of the church's teachings. Following his kidnapping conviction in 76, he was formally excommunicated. When later asked about his religious affiliation, he identified as a Methodist, the denomination of which he was raised. Go from one extreme to the other, I don't know. In mid-88, the court ruled against him once again, and Supreme Court declined to review the case.
The Methodists didn't want him either.
Nobody wanted him. Are you kidding? He's disregarded goods.
That's fair.
So, within hours of that final denial, a firm execution date of January 24th, 1989 was set. It would not move. Contrary to popular belief that the courts dragged their feet, the legal process had moved him along with unusual speed for a capital unaliving case. Even prosecutors acknowledged that his defense team never intentionally delayed the proceedings. Public frustration aside, he had been fast-tracked towards execution. With no more legal options, Sparkle Tits McGee began speaking openly with investigators about literally everything. He confessed to all 8 unalivings in Washington and Oregon, for which he had long been a prime suspect and previously denied. He also described 5 more victims, 3 in Washington, 2 in Oregon. Those identities he had never revealed. No names, no nothing, but he did give descriptions. He said he left a 5th body, believed to be George Ann Hawkins, on Taylor Mountain, and he claimed to have burned her head in Liz's fireplace. He described the Issaquah site like he was just there. He was totally consumed with unalivings all the time. Author Ann, his coworker, we talked about her way at the beginning, was disturbed by his behavior. It was an absolute misogyny of his crimes that stunned me. His rage against women, he had no compassion at all, and his murders, his unalivings were his life's work. He finally confessed to the additional unalivings in Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, many of which were never linked to him originally. He often described using his apartment in Utah as a setting for reenacting scenes from detective magazines he said he never read. Even in confession, he was strategic. He deliberately withheld names or dates, locations, hoping that offering just information in small pieces or morsels would delay his execution. Despite warnings from his own legal team, tactics would backfire, and he offered vague leads in exchange for more time, which quickly became known as, quote, Ted's Bones for Time scheme. Investigators saw through it, and his stalling only deepened their resolve to move forward with the execution. In most cases, no new remains were found. In Colorado, Detective Matt Lindvall, which we talked about earlier, believed he was conflicted, torn between his desire to extend his life and his obsessive need to remain in complete control, as he was the only one who knew his victim's resting place. With the courts no longer an option, his supporters turned to Florida's Governor Bob Martinez for executive clemency. Diane Weiner, a Florida attorney and his romantic attachment, his final girlfriend, asked for families of victims to request a stay so he could provide more details. Every family refused.
They should. They want nothing to do with you, sir. They will take unanswered whereabouts as opposed to letting you live any longer.
They already believed that their loved ones were dead. They didn't need his confession to confirm that, Anne wrote. Governor Martinez was firm, stating, "We are not going to have the system manipulated by him. For him to be negotiating for his life over the bodies of victims is despicable." Carol Ann Boone, who defended his innocence for years, was devastated by all of his last-minute admissions. You know what? Honestly, I do feel bad for her because she had been groomed to think that he was a good guy.
She believed his lies. So, I mean, yes, but also at the same time, boo-hoo, he needs to die. Also, I'm not surprised state of Florida fast-tracked him straight to, because at that point, they were using Old Sparky, and that was the name of the chair. And at that point, the state of Florida liked sending people to Old Sparky. Like, there was a freaking monthly quota kind of thing.
Which we're going to be talking on one of the Serotonin Saturdays about Old Sparky and a couple of other items that are owned by Bagel Hands. We have an episode aired out for that later. Not recorded yet, obviously, but. So Carol moved back to Washington with their daughter Rose and refused to take his phone call to her the morning of his unaliving. Quote, she was hurt by his relationship with Diana and devastated by the sudden wholesale of confession in his last days. So he talked about unaliving himself the night before his execution, telling BAU detective Hagemeyer he didn't want to give the state the satisfaction of seeing him dead. He refused his last meal and was executed in the electric chair, aka Old Sparky, Florida State Prison at 7:16 a.m. at January 24th, 1989. His final words were to his lawyer and a minister, Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends. Outside the prison, hundreds of people gathered in celebration, singing, dancing, and setting off fireworks. I would too. Cheers erupted off as a white hearse carrying his body left the facility, and he was cremated in Gainesville, and his ashes were scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, a location that remains undisclosed to this day. So, that being said, that is our tale of Sparkle Tits McGee, aka Ted Theodore Bundy. There has been a lot of media to do with Ted Bundy. I will list it on our post. There's going to be a separate Instagram slide that is just media because there is so many. It is a full page on my Google Doc of just stuff that is about him. So I have some notes. In total, the remains of several of his victims, including Nancy Wilcox, Deborah Kent, Julie Cunningham, Lynette Culver, Shelley Ray Robinson, sometimes omitted, and Susan Curtis, those bodies were never recovered. And they're still somewhere out there. I'm pretty sure they're in the same location because he kept that location close to him. This is not including the nameless victims that we discussed in his confessions to the BAU, of which, in my research, I found 7 nameless victims, not 5. And that, after over 2 hours, is the story of Sparkle Tits McGee, aka Ted Bundy. I'm done.
Take a moment with our team as we pay tribute to the victims of this ruthless assailant. please join us in a moment of silence as we honor the victims.
And now that wound can heal because we've got him covered now.
I'm going to have mini quiches and I'm going to watch Bluey for like 5 minutes before I have a client reading. Because that sucked.
It really truly did. I was over here playing arrow game to help me get through this.
I mean, listen, guys, we have 2 Swedish chefs on this episode. Normally, I just have 1. So you're in for a treat for that. I edited the Serotonin Saturday episode this morning with her on the phone because I was like, I want to get this done. So it's already prepped. I'm glad I did because I had that little increase of serotonin, which you guys will have Serotonin Saturday tomorrow, which we have some gossip stories coming to us, but we want a few more. We want some hot tea, some pull the tea, because we have
the piping tea.
The piping tea. We want the elocution lady from Mulan kind of tea. Send us your tea, your gossip. Because right now I only have 3 people who have given it to me, and it's straight from the horse's mouth. So I have to change their names, but it's delicious and I love it. But you guys are in for a treat tomorrow because tomorrow for Serotonin Saturday, we're discussing teachers for our Serotonin Saturday. So not just regular serotonin stuff. This one's all about teachers.
And in the best ways.
Very much so. I am sorry that I did horrible things to your ears today and to your eyeballs. I am sorry. But we are going to have 10 minutes of silence for the victims, as we've done many times before on previous episodes. If you don't like it, tough cookies, deal with it. But that is today's episode. I hated it. So did Rachel. Stay feral.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Bite the hand.
And we'll see you guys next time. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, party possums, that's today's dose of the Pandemonium. Thanks for listening and watching the ADHD chaos. Review, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Tune in next week for more continued madness. And as always, stay feral.